Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our first Twitter Spaces. It's fact-checking day, and today we'll have a discussion with the experts. I'll give the floor to Martyna Bildziukiewicz. She's the head of Task Force East here at the EEAS, and she will be moderating this debate, and she will also introduce you to our special guests. Martyna, on to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Happy International Fact-Checking Day, and you are now witnessing, dear audience, the first ever Twitter space hosted by the European External Action Service and EUvsDisinfo. Welcome. A special word of welcome, of course, to our guests, Oksana Iliuk of Detector Media and Alyona Romanyuk, who is coordinator of Putin Lies, and Nota. I think we managed to gather two representatives of very diverse backgrounds as far as fact-checking and media literacy efforts in Ukraine are concerned. So on the one hand, we have Detector Media and Oksana Iliuk. Detector has been one of the oldest, if I dare to say, fact-checking organizations, not only in Ukraine, but I think globally. And the Putin Lies initiative, as well as Nota are newer initiatives, but we will find out directly from our speakers what those organizations and what their work is exactly about. Let's start with Oksana Iliuk. Welcome. So glad that you could join us today. Ksenia, if you can say a few words about your work and your organization for introductions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Martyna, for such a great introduction. So, Detector Media, yes, indeed, is one of the oldest media organizations. Altogether, we have been working in the field of media literacy, propaganda and disinformation for almost 20 years already. So we've started as media monitoring organization. We are at first we're like journalism-oriented organization. We were monitoring adherence to journalistic standards, and of course. After 2014, after the Revolution of Dignity and Russian invasion to Donbass and illegal annexation of Crimea, we've understood that we have to dig deeper in Russian disinformation in particular, and that it's all together, all connected. So we've started doing that, and I'm personally responsible for data analytics at Detector Media. So what I mainly do with my team is that analyze Russian information operations on social media and try to adapt some of the elements of artificial intelligence to do it more efficiently.
Thank you very much. That eases us into what Media Detector and you yourself, Ksenia, are doing. For further introductions, Alyona, if you could say a few words about both Putin Lies initiative and Nota.
Yes, hello to everyone. Happy to International Fact-Checking Day. Yes, I work with counter disinformation, Russian propaganda, and hybrid war more than 6 years, and I managed to organize a few projects. They were behind the news. It's a fact-checking project for Regional Press Development Institute. The main aim was to debunk everyday fakes in very simple and understandable form, because I'm aware that fact-checking should use both forms, serious and funny. Everyday fakes and Russian fakes have a great audience because they are very simple, because they are emotional, and I'm sure that fact-checking and debunking should use the same instruments to spread fact information and facts. When the pandemic started, I also organized the other project in Ukraine behind the pandemic, www.coronafakes.com, where I united journalists from 6 media and more than 20 analysts from different fields and other countries to counter the infodemic, to counter the disinformation about coronavirus. In July 2020, 2021, on Kremlin website, Vladimir Putin published an article about so-called one history of the Ukrainians and Russians, and it's really the KGB guideline about Ukraine, rewriting of our history, culture, system of politics and economy, etc. So I received a lot of messages from my friends and from the subscribers of my project's request to explain all those narratives and fakes. But that article was too big, more than 40,000 signs. Well, I made a call on Facebook. Who wants to be a fact checker and help us to check, explain, and prove that the president of Russian Federation lies in his article. We divided the article into 130 theses. Finally, 30 volunteers, teachers, analysts, historians, journalists agreed to make the primary fact checking, and later the team of 5 editors and professional fact checkers made the final fact checking. Russian propaganda uses the same narratives and the same messages to make Russian impact on people of different country. In February, I started a new project, Nota Yenota, or Note is Note. It's a game of words in Ukrainian. And the aim of this project was to spread media literacy in game forms. I started to organize anti-fake quiz, intellectual games, quests, and other forms on examples of information attack and manipulations cases. But with full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine, holding games offline is impossible. So I have in Ukraine a lot of fakes and informational attacks. So I have returned to that I know how to do well, to check facts and to explain complicated things by simple words.
Thank you very much, Alyona. I couldn't agree more. The approach of being a little bit lighter and a bit more serious and combine those two approaches. This is also something that we have been doing for EUvsDisinfo all along. We will get back to the approaches, but before we do that, let's zoom a little bit. If I may ask you, now that we are in the 38th day of the war that was brought to Ukraine by Russia again, can you tell us how the Ukrainian society's approach to disinformation, how the dynamics changed in terms of disinformation, in terms of fighting it? Do you see differences between what was happening in the information environment and in the society's responses before the 24th of February this year and after? Let's start with Ksenia.
Thank you so much for such a great question, because that's actually a phenomena that I am being like an expert in disinformation right now witnessing myself. Because in terms of disinformation from the Russian side, there is not so much that has changed, because actually Russian disinformation is not about so much about quality as rather about repetition, continuation, and like flooding the information space. So that's exactly what we've seen in the first days of full-scale invasion and what we continue seeing right now. But what is completely different right now is the attitude of Ukrainians and Ukrainian society towards it. Because disinformation prospers when there is lack of trust, a lack of understanding of the consequences of disinformation. And unfortunately, in a very hard way, but Ukrainian society right now witnessing that disinformation is not something, ambiguous, far away from our everyday lives. But this is something that could actually kill people. And right now, we see that disinformation affects us constantly. We see that each small fake that Russia is targeting Ukrainian or other informational communities, societies, it could lead to what is happening in Ukraine. Because in fact, Russian disinformation is a backbone of the full-scale invasion right now. So unfortunately, in a very painful, in a very hard way, but the Ukrainian society in general have realized the consequences of disinformation. Therefore, the attitude towards it has changed. First of all, Ukrainians consider it in a more serious way right now. They have enormous, huge trust to government authorities to the official sources of information, to civil society, and to like fact checking. Because actually, like if we say about fact checking, yeah, sometimes it's so hard to deliver to the general public, to the general audience. There are a lot of challenges that this, let's say, industry is facing. But right now we have this enormous trust. So, for instance, what we've seen since the 21st of February, like we've started a Detector Media Disinfo Chronicles, where we actually documenting every fake, every manipulation, every narrative that we catch in information environment of Ukraine coming from Russia. And we've posted our email there saying like, okay, if you have something you want us to check, please feel free to send it. And during the first weeks, we were actually drowning in requests from average Ukrainians saying like, can you please check it? Tell us if it's true. It is essentially important for us because someone's life depends on it. So like right now we see this huge shift in mindset towards facts, towards understanding what disinformation is, and towards this great trust that we enjoy right now as a civil society.
Thank you, Ksenia. I think you brought up one of the most essential issues in terms of fighting disinformation, which is the public trust. But what I also take from what you were saying is that it also puts a huge responsibility on the shoulders of fact checkers. Alyona, what's your take on this?
I agree with Ksenia, and I think a lot of Ukrainians have a great source of information in fact checkers, because in Ukraine we have really great teams of fact checkers: Stop Fake, Vox Check, Without Lie, Behind the News, Detector Media, Nota Yenota, and other small initiatives. And beginning with the starting of the full cell invasion in Ukraine, people started to write fact checkers. Please tell me, is it true or false? Please check this information. Could you help me to know where is the fake, and should I believe in this or not? And so on. But we have, if we talk about the spreading of disinformation, I want to return in 2014, because the war was breaking out in 2014, because Russia had invasion in Ukraine in 2014, and we saw all these instruments of hybrid war, of propaganda 8 years ago. And if in comparison, in 2014 and 2022 February, I saw the same instruments, the same wave. A lot of fakes spreading in virus format, in Viber chat, in Telegram channels, in the comments under Facebook post, under Twitter post, under Instagram post, and so on. And the narratives are the same. The messages are different, but the main messages are the same: about Nazis in Ukraine, about pressure on Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, and a lot of other crazy theories. And Russian propaganda has a few target audience in Ukraine. It's volunteers, it's politicians, it's our army, defense, and NGO, media, journalists, and so on. Also, Russian propaganda has one more target audience as external audience: foreign media, politicians, opinion makers. But all these fakes serve to spread the narratives of Russian propaganda, and a lot of manipulations, combined truth and lie, suppression information, taken out of context, fake connections between different events in Ukraine, and for example, about the revolution of dignity, substance of concepts, when don't call the war, but like space operation. It's the biggest fake, and it's deeper concept to form Russian agenda to spread disinformation and to justify the war. And so now the hot phase of fakes which spread panic is decreasing, as for me. But other wave with messages about secret biolabs, Nazis, and anti-Russia is taking root, and it's a big threat for Ukraine and for the world.
Thank you very much, Alyona. If I may build on what you were saying about the repetitiveness of those narratives, this is something that we in EUvsDisinfo see a lot as well, and we try to show the pattern of lies and of those disinformation narratives. We also try to show that, for example, this narrative about Nazis allegedly ruling Ukraine, this actually came about in late 2013, and it is just being recycled as many, many other narratives. So in terms of what is actually being said, it's actually quite difficult when you're a fact checker to be surprised, right? Nevertheless, what I think changed significantly in the last years is how those narratives are being pushed, in what channels, with what techniques, with what procedures. Ksenia, maybe you would like to dive into that. What has changed in terms of pushing the narrative?
Yes, and indeed. I mean, you've mentioned a very good point that it's very hard to be surprised by the essence, like the narratives itself. But what is actually evolving constantly is the techniques itself. So, for instance, what I would like to highlight, what I was personally and I continue working on is Telegram. As one of the main sources of disinformation in Ukraine before the full-scale invasion and right now, because Telegram opened a explicitly new area for the techniques of disinformation. So, for instance, what we see there is first is the phenomena of anonymous Telegram channels that have thousands of hundreds of subscribers. Without being totally anonymous and posting insights and gossips that they get from international, some organizations, some high-ranked politicians of Ukraine, and so on and so far. They always say that we are not saying that this is 100% true, but this is the insight that we've got. They're trying to say that they are Robin Hoods of information society, like when there is government that are hiding information, and these Telegram channels are the ones bringing the truth to the people. So this is like the first thing. The second thing that enabled this huge spread of disinformation, and in particular the narrative about external governance in Ukraine, is how these Telegram channels are linked inside. So when we did in Detector Media, when we did a huge analysis of Ukrainian segment of Telegram, and when we did network analysis to see who shares information from who, like which exact Telegram channels share what information, we saw that there are several networks of these Telegram channels that are connected, like a media empire, like a media holding. So there are like from 50 to 100 Telegram channels that are well connected. They do repost like 2-3 times a week at least. So when the person gets inside of that network, it is almost impossible to get out, because first the narratives are like unified, the messages, but second, if you're saying, okay, I'm reading this Telegram channel, it reposts the other Telegram channels, I will subscribe to it as well. And you are trying to subscribe to as many channels as possible to get many information, to have many sources, because again, in terms of media literacy, we're always saying have several sources, do not trust one sources, and people are trying to have several sources, but it appeared that all these sources are actually the one source itself. So in terms of technique, this is something that I would really like to highlight. And also in other things that we see that is actually changing completely the way we understand war and informational warfare. And I'm pretty sure that there will be tons of doctoral dissertations written on it soon, on what is happening in Ukraine right now. But first time in all this situation, we see promises from Russian disinformation to make deepfakes of Ukrainian president saying that we're going to give up or something like that. We see some meddling into accounts, trying to hack accounts of volunteers, of Ukrainian public leaders to post something from it. So we see that the technology is changing. So this line between the narratives and the technology is very blurred right now. So it's all together, all combined, I would say.
Thank you very much. Alyona, would you like to add to that? Any new techniques you're encountering in your work?
In first 10 days of full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine, with a team of volunteers and activists, we controlled more than 100 close Viber chats. We managed to track viral fakes and debunk them quickly in these closed Viber chats. So we create a short debunking in these chats and share them with activists, and a lot of volunteers help us to do that. Also, we monitor the anonymous Telegram channels because its number is really increased, and a lot of fakes spreading from these anonymous Telegram channels. We track Russian fakes and about Ukraine in comments under different posts on Facebook, in comments under a YouTube video, and to spread fact information there. Also, we mark doubtful channels, Telegram channels, and to create lists with fake anonymous Telegram channels, and to spread this list to our audience and to close Viber communities. Also, we create lists with trustful and official sources to help people to know where they can read fact information and information without fakes. Also, we debunk the fakes which spread it on SMS sending. Some sources from Russia or from I don't know other countries, but it is an example of Russian propaganda, sending a lot of SMS to our volunteers, our army, our people. For example, a few days ago, a lot of people in the west of Ukraine received SMS like this: Ukraine for Ukrainians, Magyars on the nights. Magyars is not good names for contemptuous names for Hungarians. But Ukraine is a multinational country, and more than 100 nationalities live fully in Ukraine. And we don't have the motto "Ukraine for Ukrainians" because it's stupid as for me, and it's terrible to understand that. But when I started to dig this thesis, I found that in Russian in 2020 was as a sociology research, and there was a question how Russians take idea Russia for Russians, and more than 50% people agreed with this idea, with this concept, and only 29% said that this idea Russia for Russians is really fascism. So Russian propaganda works very interesting because it doesn't produce anything new. It only rewrite its own thesis, its own narratives, its own messages for our country and for countries in our with our borders, for Poland, for Hungary, for Estonia, and others. So I can add a lot more, but I'm not sure I have enough time.
Thank you very much, Alyona. I think those insights are very, very important to our audience. You mentioned, both of you, Ksenia and Alyona, you mentioned quite a few techniques that are being used right now to occupy the information space and to manipulate our minds. Maybe on a little bit lighter note, we agree that the narratives that Russia is pushing are repetitive. Many of them use, especially now during the war, and they use very serious accusations and very big words such as Nazi, such as genocide. But I would like to turn this around a little bit, and I would like to ask you actually what were the most outrageous, the most also perhaps funny from your point of view cases of disinformation messages. Maybe you know of a narrative of a message where the Kremlin actually, so to speak, stumbled upon its own shoes, and the disinformation message was so sloppy that it was clear all along that it is disinformation and you don't actually need a lot to debunk it. Alyona, can you think of such an example?
Oh, sorry, do you hear me? I had an unstable internet connection. Do you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, great. About cases of narratives and messages. As I said about our project PutinLies.com, there are a lot of narratives, but we can say about them. Main about Ukraine is a fake state, is a failed state. Ukraine does never exist, and it's was a project of Lenin or a project of other governments, so on. One of very spreading narrative is Ukraine is anti-Russia project. It's a very interesting example because this narrative Russia tried to use about Georgia in 2008, but it was bad trying. These narratives was didn't take root. So in 2014, this narrative about Ukraine as anti-Russia project, Russia continued to spread about our country. But Ukraine was never anti-Russia, and Ukraine has its own history, which Russia tried to rewrite to create another history, another culture, to appropriate our heroes, our writers, our cultural makers, our famous people, and to demonize our real history, our heroes. Also, if we talk about Russian narratives, we talk about very old fake about American biolabs. It's very interesting why Russia begin to share it now again, because in February this message doesn't share. Instead, the main accent was made on Ukraine as Nazis and special operation about making Ukrainians freedom from Nazis, from Nazi control, and so on. But when it became understandable that it's a fake in Ukraine, there aren't any Nazis, and we want to be Russia or Russians, we have another agenda, we have another history. Russia began to spread the old, very old fake about secret American biolabs, and to this message have a lot of interpretation, a lot of fakes. Earlier, its fake its message was spreading in Georgia, in Transnistria, in Moldova, and in other countries. Now, Russian TV channels, internet media created a lot crazy theories about how Ukrainians wanted to destroy all the world by bio weapons and so on. So we also have a lot of substitution of concepts when Russia says that in Ukraine she has a spec operation, when there isn't Ukrainians, but there are Russian people, Russian speaking people, and so on. When the so-called Nazi polk Azov, and from the calling Nazis on polk Azov to call all the Ukrainian Nazis. So it is a war. We have an informational war, and the propaganda and information attacks are the main instruments of this information war.
Thank you, Alyona. Yes, the bioweapons/biolabs conspiracy theory seems to be spreading quite a lot also outside of Europe. And I think this is one of the most outrageous narratives that we see so far, next to the one that is emerging these days about alleged human trafficking and organ trafficking from Ukraine, that Ukraine is committing allegedly during the war. Ksenia, any other outrageous examples that you could name?
Yes, because actually I love making fun of Russian disinformation because I truly believe that humor is one of the strongest weapons against it. And in fact, some funny examples of Russian disinformation that I'm going to tell about, they actually show how big the gap between Russians and Ukrainians in terms of culture, senses, there is. So, for instance, in the first week of full-scale invasion, Ukrainian soldiers posted a picture of, like a screenshot of phone of one of Russian soldiers texting with his mother before he was captured. So Russian disinformation saw that and decided to make a Ukrainian version of it, imagining that they made a screenshot of Ukrainian soldier chatting with his mom before he died. And when we saw that screenshot, it was so ridiculous. It was full of stereotypes, saying something like, imagine, in the mind of Russian disinformation, a soldier that is dying, and his last words to his mom were something like, I would die to eat some salo. Salo is a traditional thing in Ukraine. I personally don't eat it, but it's some stereotypical way of describing Ukrainian cuisine. And he was saying something like, I would die for it. That would be a very rude parallel to do, but in Russian disinformation eyes, so you could understand the ridiculousness of it, it would be something to say that French would die for croissants or something like that. And there were a lot of these stereotypes in that messages that show that they know so little about Ukraine. In fact, about modern Ukraine, not the Ukraine that they invented for themselves. So we have these types of very funny things. But the other thing is that how Russian disinformation kind of debunks itself sometimes. So one of the favorites, my favorites right now, is that at the beginning of the full-scale invasions, they said something like, we have proofs that Ukraine was planning to attack Crimea. In several days, they said, we have proofs that Ukraine was planning to attack Belarus. Then, in several days again, they said, okay, we have proof that Ukraine tried to attack Transnistria. Then they said that, okay, we have proof that Ukraine was doing nuclear weapons. And then again, in several days, they say, we have solid proofs that Ukraine have these extremely modern biolabs. And I was reading all that and I was thinking, oh my God, what a great country I live in terms of like how much power, capacity, potential we should have in the idea of Russian disinformation to do all that while being in war with one of the strongest armies in the world. So when you see like the bigger picture, you could see sometimes how ridiculous and stupid Russian disinformation could be. Unfortunately, it is still effective in a lot of ways, but again, it has a lot of funny stuff to talk about, and I personally think we should talk about that to show people how it could be actually, and to make fun of it.
I very much agree with you.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, it's really a lot of these fakes was aimed to Russian internal audience, and a lot of Russians really believe in it, that we have nuclear powers, that we wanted to attack Crimea, Belarus, Russian and other regions, and they really believe in those fakes. But one of the most ridiculous things of the late days recently, it's about Solovyov, who is the so-called star of Russian talk show. He said in I think 22nd of February that Ukraine, it's not a country, its army, it's not an army because we only raise a hand or raise an eye and Ukraine will pass. But the month later in March, on 20th of March, he said we fight with the second powerful army in Europe after our army. So it's not it will not a quick operation because Ukraine has a very powerful army. So it's have to make change in or change the opinion of its person and to change the opinion of Russians to of TV audience of this talk show in 1 month.
Of course, consistency has never been a very strong suit of Russia's disinformation. And if I may comment on the previous example of Ukraine allegedly trying to attack other countries, this resonates with me also because I'm Polish and I could see my country being accused of very similar things. We were accused, for example, amid the democratic protests in Belarus in 2020 that we are to annex Belarus, but we were also accused of preparing to annex Lithuania. So other countries also are accused of such outrageous practices. Before I open the floor to our audience, I would like to ask a final question to both of you, Alyona and Ksenia, and maybe starting with you, Alyona. How will disinformation shape Russia's disinformation shape in the weeks to come? What do you think is now? What should we expect?
Oh, I think it will be a lot of fakes. Some of these fakes will be some of these fakes will be dead, will be stillborn, and we also have a lot of theses from experts, from bloggers, from TV stars about war in Ukraine, and I think it will change in some cases because now Russia have to justify his its army when the army was taking out they sources they power closer to the border, to the Russian borders. So I think we also can see a lot of half truths the news, because Russia uses half lie, half truth, so some facts, some truth, and to make to make some thesis, some news, and to spread this not only for internal audience but also on external audience. And I think Russia will attack by its propaganda to other countries. Today we've seen that Moldova don't take sanctions to Russia due to gas, due to other things, and it's terrible because Russia occupied not only Crimea and our country and some territory of our country, but also Transnistria. And some of this propaganda will stay stupid, some fakes will be ridiculous, some will be stillborn, but some narratives will be spread, and not only for Ukrainians but also for people in other countries, to change their opinion about war in Ukraine and about Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Alyona. Ksenia, from your perspective, what is the perspective for the next weeks, and what do we need to be aware of?
I would like to say that Russian disinformation has regrouped right now, from my perspective of view. What I mean is that, yes, indeed, we saw very, very poor quality disinformation pieces during the first week of full-scale invasion, but they are not going to do that anymore. I mean, it's similar to what happened on the military ground when they thought that they could take over Ukraine in several days. The same was in the information space. They thought that this level of information, disinformation, would be enough to win over Ukrainian people. They realized it's not, so they are going to regroup, intensify it, and make it of better quality. So I would highlight two things. In Ukraine, the main strategy of Russia would be divide and conquer. So what they're going to do, from what we already see from the messages, is they're going to divide Ukrainians on as many levels, social groups as possible. Language, ethnicity, region of where these people lived, and so many other things like politician versus people. And so as many lines that they could find between the people, between the groups, they're going to divide them and make them fight with each other, so they would be weak enough to fight with Russia itself. So this is my prediction for Ukrainian information space. But if we talk about international information space, I suggest that I assume that Russia is going to, first of all, catch the attention, try to steal the attention, because we understand that war is already going for over a month. So the attention will be naturally declining, unfortunately, but that's how our nature works. We cannot be in stress for a very long time. So it's going to be decreasing. So here is the place for Russian narratives to come. So they're going to try to steal the attention so that we could, in all this Russian full-scale invasion, the international community would talk more about Russian issues rather than Ukrainians one. And here we're going to see a lot of, culture involved, like speculations, a lot of narratives about that Russian people are struggling too, and so on and so forth. So we have to be very aware of that and track the roots of that messages flooding the information space of the whole world.
Thank you very much, Ksenia. All of this means that both Alyona and Ksenia will have still a lot to do. Dear audience, if you would like to ask questions, this will be the time. Please press the button that says request to speak, and we'll then open your mic.
I'm from Austria, actually, and I'm working at Europe Direct Vienna and also active with civil society organizations like the Union of European Federalists. And my question would be, is there any plan right now to adopt to the actual situation from the side of the EUvsDisinfo or the side of the European Commission to this multi-level strategy? Because they are right now destroying our democracy and harming our democracy with influencers, so not only with RT or Sputnik, but also with young influencers who are bought actually by Russia or, for example, also by China. We recognized in the last month, for example, that China is just going there to Austrian influencers and asking them, would you just do please a video about Chinese culture, something really just harmless sounding, and then asking them for more, for example. Oh yeah, we would invite you, for example, to just a travel visit, and you could make also a report there about China, for example, because there were some rumors about Uyghurs. But here, for example, you can see here in the city nothing is harming, and just make a video about that, and we support you with the travel or just with equipment or anything else. So the meaning is that Russia and China are working right now really to destroy civil society and to act on different levels where actually the European Union is not active. They are active actually on spaces like Discord, they are active on Twitch, and we have to invent creative, innovative formats, and like the colleague was saying, with humor, so that means infotainment and edutainment. And this is actually something what we tried in Austria. For example, we created a platform against EU COVID-19 fake news, which we called Mega, which you reach about mega.video, and also tried actually to shorten and to simplify European communication. We created, for example, short links to official EU websites like EUfake.news, because it's very hard, for example, for us when we are asked for interviews to journalists to communicate European websites, because the websites are so totally long and there are not short links existing. Because sometimes when I get and receive short links, you can't spell them and you can't communicate them in TV or in podcasts. So my question would be if there is any further development and if they have anything further planned in this direction.
Thank you, Daniel. If I may say, the event is mostly about Ukrainian fact-checkers and their approach to fighting disinformation. So I will not answer your questions at length. I can just say that, yes, we are very much aware of evolving tactics. And we just published an article, for example, of how a platform TikTok is used, including how influencers are also used to advance the Kremlin's agenda. But this is not really the topic of further this discussion. So I will happily discuss further with you on other opportunities. But I think this is also a question about different approaches. So Ksenia, Alyona, if you want to comment on this, please go ahead.
I would just a very short comment that thank you so much for bringing it up, because what you said that seemed harmless at the beginning, and this is something we have to remind ourselves about Russian disinformation, about Chinese disinformation, that at first glance, at the beginning, it seems very harmless. That's why a lot of measures, a lot of things were not taking right on time, just because decision makers and key stakeholders were thinking in a short-term perspective, not in a very long-term perspective. The same that was in Ukraine, that a lot of Russian channels and other things, they were not treated the way they should be treated. There were a lot of debate about freedom of speech and other things, while it was not such a debate. It was supposed to be completely other debate about hate speech, about threats to democracy, about targeting specific groups, and so on and so forth. So this is a very good message for all of us to remind ourselves that all these information things, they seem very harmless at the beginning. So we have a great chance in terms of new techniques of disinformation to act right away, as we have now a very, very sad example of what disinformation could actually do in Ukraine.
I want to add that that propaganda, it's increasing when there is an informational vacuum in the society, in the country. I can saw it when the infodemic started. We saw lack of info. We had a lack of information. We had a lack of understanding the situation. We'll have a lack of the official representatives who can make an explanation of this topic. So in result, the disinformation and the propaganda from Russia, from Chinese about pandemic, about coronavirus was spreading very quickly and make a lot of harm, was really harmful. The same situation with Russian propaganda about war in Ukraine, about the situation in Ukraine, and this propaganda ruins the democratic institute not only in Ukraine but also in other countries. I think the debunking fakes is very useful, but is the least useful instrument to fight with propaganda, because the main essence should be to share the facts, to share the information, truth information, as the speaker says, edutainment, infotainment, that one of the great instruments as for me to fight with this propaganda in is game formats like quiz, like quests. We started to make this format to fight with disinformation in Nota Yenota, but the war now to postpones our plan. But it's I'm sure that debunking fakes is helpful, but in the long perspective, we should use the facts, the education, and other format to spread fact information about history, about culture in every country.
Thank you very much. I think we may have time for one more question, and this question goes to Eva.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the discussion and happy fact-checking day. I was wondering, I was listening to you and basically Alyona kind of answered a bit, but I was wondering for those who are not fact-checkers by profession and work in a very different fields, what can we do? How do you have any kind of practical tips for those who are just consumers of information? How to, I don't know, how to avoid the trap of disinformation?
Please, if we can go in the order of Alyona first and then Ksenia.
Okay, I try. The first rule is keep your mind cool, because we have two kinds of information perception, emotional and rational. All we have high education, good knowledge in analysis of information, and the majority of us sure that are able to distinguish the facts from fakes. But all we have some triggers, topics which involve emotions. In result, even smart and critical thinking people may believe in fake. So we have to keep a head above water. Then we should use the trustful sources of information. Believe in, as for Ukrainians, in armed forces of Ukraine. Distinguish facts from opinions. Don't use anonymous sources of information. Telegram channels, Viber communities, other internet media without authors and editors. So if you don't know who is the author of the information, don't believe in it. And if some information, some news raise your emotion, say stop yourself and go to the kitchen to drink tea.
Alyona gave such a detailed answer. Completely agree. I would just add something like trust information, trust organizations that has professional capacity in it, that are doing fact-checking, that are doing media monitorings, media analysis, disinformation analysis. It is very important because nowadays we have a lot of information and it's very hard to proceed everything. So we very often use different hacks, how to minimize that information, how to get, like even paid newsletters. We want some professional to store the information that we are particularly interested in. So I always suggest considering organizations that are already reading all that toxic, because it's often very toxic if we speak about Russian disinformation, all the toxic content, they sort it out and they show you clearly what is what in all that information chaos. So that I really suggest subscribing to several of such organizations that are doing like international, European level, country related level, and just to follow what they are doing and not to actually read all that harmful content, because it's indeed very toxic and very harmful for ourselves. So just save yourself some time and your mental health.
Thank you very much for all those tips. Before we wrap up, I understand that the person who wanted to ask a question before now has all the technical capability that there is needed. So please, please ask your question, Majola.
Thank you very much, Martyna. My question is actually, okay, so we've done some fact-checking on the Russia-Ukraine crisis on this side of the world. And one of the things we find, and of course this is even with reporters, with journalists here on the ground, is that there's sort of a confirmation bias that we have to even deal with as journalists. So let me give an example. So we're used to Russian propaganda, or in the past we've debunked lots and lots of Russian propaganda. So of course, when the war broke out and all that, we see some videos with wrong subtitles making the rounds, and people are saying it means this or that and all that. And one of the things we find is that when most of those videos come out, the first instinct of many of the people on ground working on that is that this is Russian propaganda. And sometimes when we dig into it, when we do some work, we find out that it's actually not from the Russian, it's actually something from the other side or somewhere else far away across the world. Now, as reporters, as fact checkers, we sort of can get through all of that. So my question would be, dealing with general public, dealing with trying to make people understand. I know that, of course, on the back of the US elections and some other elections around the world is already sort of used to the thinking of Russian propaganda. So in this case, how can the general public deal with that sort of bias that we already have towards the Russian when approaching the issue of the conflict we're currently seeing in that region?
Thank you very much for this question. I think this is against a bigger problem of contamination of the information environment in general. Alyona, Ksenia, would you have comments?
I completely agree that that's a very large question to tackle right now and to discuss. What I would say is that it is very important for us to, in terms of like such videos and other stuff, the information environment is very polluted, but I see journalists as guides in all of this, especially if we talk about like foreign countries, if we talk about like war in Ukraine, so that the quality journalism is essentially important, as it has all the tools and all the means to check the information and to deliver quality, unbiased information to its audiences and to show what is actually happening in Ukraine. But I agree that it could be very complicated right now, as the information flow is flooded altogether, not just Russian disinformation, but just regular people trying to capture something, to send something, to be useful in their own thinking. So we have to be, as usual, very careful with everything, very unbiased as much as it's possible, and just to follow the instructions and guidelines that we have to minimize the bias, to check the information, because that's something that we are often being like, I read a lot on Twitter, a lot of people writing to me that, oh, how can you say that this is Russian disinformation? I mean, like, Ukraine cannot say that this is Russian disinformation, as Ukraine is a part of a conflict, and you are like an interested part. You cannot do that. And I always say that Ukraine, in comparison to Russia, has always been very open and transparent in terms of that. For instance, my organization and our colleagues, we always have open methodology, always published, always in details what we have done, what is the idea of the analysis, while the Russian organizations, medias, whatever, they don't do that. They just put the label that this is false and this is false, and we think in that way. So I truly believe in the guidelines and on the rules of these games, in this game of information checking. So just as a conclusion, I would just say that fact-checking day is important, and we have all the means to do that.
I will be short because this issue is really is for another discussion, and it's very important for us, for foreign journalists, for foreign media, to understand how the propaganda works, where are our bias and other bias of our people, our ordinary people, and so on. And if you want to check some information about Ukraine, about Ukrainian history, culture, about quotes of other politicians, please feel free to send to write to me or to other Ukrainian fact-checking organization and we will help to check this information in Ukraine. But the most useful instrument against Russian propaganda is to study history, I think, and how Russia invaded other countries, other territories, and how Russia rewrites other countries' history.
Thank you so much. I think these are the great words to conclude with. Thank you very, very much, Oksana, Iliuk, and Alyona Romanyuk, great fact checkers, both in Ukraine as we speak. So when they work, when they fact check, when they inform us, you can be absolutely sure that this comes straight from Ukraine, and what they are talking about, they see with their own eyes. Thank you so much for being with us, Ksenia and Alyona. I think the main takeaways for the fact-checking days on the individual level for our audiences, please remember to keep your head cool, drink tea before you share anything online, use trustful sources, and check in with professional fact-checkers such as the ones that we had the pleasure to host today. Also, thank you very much for the EU delegation in Kiev for helping organizing this event, and thank you very much also to young European ambassadors who, as a project supported by the EU Neighbours East, also took part in this event. Thank you very much. Until next time, have a beautiful Saturday.